We're going to move on to our final segment. Joining us here in studio is going to be Josph Ested. He's the author of the new book, Police Brutality Matters. And then joining us via Skype is Brandon Tatum. He is the Director of Urban Engagement at Turning Point USA. Welcome, Brandon.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Hey.
Great.
Good to have you.
So Josph, can you tell us a little bit about your book? What are the key takeaways you want readers to get from this?
To understand that it explains the culture of policing. It explains me coming from the environment that I come from. Come from a poor, low-income area and experiencing police brutality myself as a young man, and then coming into the police department. So I kind of understand both sides of the spectrum, seeing what the problem is with the community and also the problem with the culture of policing.
And what are some of the conclusions kind of that you found, or I guess policies that you're pushing for?
Okay, I guess what I want to do is to start the conversation as far as changing the narrative. And people from the way I grew up at, they look at police officers in a negative aspect because for years, the perception when it came down to police was always negative. Mm-hmm. It was always bad. So they got this mindset that all police are bad. Me coming from that environment, I understand because the police that environment very aggressively. So, me being a young black man coming out my building, getting thrown to the ground, if I don't see anything else, that's what I see. So when you're in that environment, you see nothing but police brutality and excessive force. So when you start trying to figure out the concept of why they think that way, I was from that environment. So then I became a police officer, and then going back, working in that environment, then talking to my fellow officers, trying to understand, okay, what is wrong with this environment? I knew the way I was raised and the way the police were, that was inaccurate, that was wrong policing. But what I found out is that you had a group of people policing a community that they have no understanding about the culture of that community. Mm-hmm. So, like, for example, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time, just gonna give you one example. I was standing in the projects as an officer, and one of the guys came up, another officer, he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Walking, talking around." He says, "What's going on?" I was like, "I'm walking and talking." And he was like, "Get back in the car, you don't walk around." I said, "What are you talking?" I said, "Come take a walk with me." So when he got out the car, he was walking with me, he had his hand on his gun, right? And I was like, "Is there something I need to know about?" And he was like, "It's dangerous in here." So I was like, hold on, what do you mean it's dangerous in here? He was like, "Well, it's dangerous in here." I said, "Look, you believe in black on black crime?" He said, "Yes." I said, listen. Black on black crime is a myth, it's made up. I said, and I can prove that it's a myth, it's made up, right? I said, you can't let society dictate your viewpoint on this culture. I said, you believe in this project, right? You got doctors, you got lawyers, you got police officers coming out. I said, I'm from a neighborhood just like this. He could not believe that I was from that type of neighborhood. So
all right, let's bring Brandon into this because I'm sure he'll have some thoughts to respond. So Brandon is part of Turning Point USA. We've had Brandon on the show before, and just to let our viewers know, he's wearing headphones because of his audio, so we appreciate Brandon. But we know that Turning Point USA has been very outspoken on the issue of police brutality. Candace Owens, who is a spokeswoman, has called police brutality a myth. So Brandon, walk us through that line of reasoning and give us your take on this argument in this book.
Yeah, I think that police brutality as an epidemic is a myth. I mean, when you look at police interaction, just for instance, the police represent 22% of the population. They only deal with less than 20% of the population. So we're saying about 300 million people, or 80% plus of the population, don't even have contact with the police. A study that was done in 2015 illustrated that out of over 50 million police interactions, only 2,000 sustainable complaints of police use of force were associated to the police department rightfully, and that's like a 0.0004% of all police interactions. So I think that we all have a sense of urgency when it comes to any level of inappropriate behavior by police, but to illustrate it as some type of an epidemic is disingenuous.
Josph, can you respond to that?
Yes, I totally disagree with what he said, and the reason why I say that is because he's saying epidemic. Nobody never said it's an epidemic. I've never said it was. I come from a law enforcement family. It's a problem, never said an epidemic. Now, when you talk to people who don't want to acknowledge the problems that you have in the community, he's right with the low numbers. You could take that same argument and apply it to black on black crime. It's not an epidemic. It's a problem within policing. So we need to identify that problem and figure out what that problem is. So when he and people, he has experience as a police officer, right? There's the culture of policing is protect us, police them. And if you adapt that culture, you're not going to fix the problem. We do have if you see all the videos, that's a problem. I never said it was a big problem. Right. I say it's a problem with policing that we have.
Isn't that part of the issue, though, is that in the media, and we saw the rise of activism and I would argue a lot of the divide that happened in the country around Black Lives Matter arguments, from my perspective, it sounded like they were saying it was an epidemic, and that was part of what drove our
wedge. Why do you say that so many people, when you see something like this, when you are a person of color and you see constantly this police brutality, doesn't your attitude towards the police shift and you no longer feel like they're protecting you? That's completely understandable for them to feel that way.
And it is right. It is, hold on. It is right. It is understandable, right? But the problem is the numbers that he just spotted out, that affects, the black community at a higher alarming rate than any other race. That's the problem. The problem is, it won't be a problem that affect everybody's race.
Right.
But the problem is when you look at unarmed, the numbers are low, right? When you talk about the whole population. But why within that population, those numbers are high within the black community. Right. That's the problem. Not any other community.
Yeah, let's give Brandon a chance to respond.
Yeah, so I mean, we got to look at it in context. I feel like that the media and some activists have blown this out of proportion. It's causing unnecessary fear in the black community. When you look at statistics like black unarmed people getting shot, and you're a police officer, you know that just because you're unarmed don't mean that you're not presenting yourself as a deadly threat. But just for the sake of argument, just say every single unarmed person that was shot by the police is unjustified. I mean, that's 15 people that have been murdered, and I'm not counting the number down, that's still a tragedy. Right. But 15 people in comparison to how many black individuals kill other black individuals, which is up around 6,000, 7,000 a year. So when you look at the real threat in our community, and we can look at other numbers. I mean, you're like 80 times more likely to be raped and be killed by a police officer. Right. I mean, so when you look at what are the fears, I mean, think about this as well. Almost 50% of the black deaths in this country come from heart disease and cancer. So there's a lot of
Brandon, let's give Josph a moment. Let's give Josph a moment to respond.
We should be afraid of, we should be addressing. Right. And I think to fear police more than any other element in our community, even black on black crime, is just not teaching the full spectrum. It's sad when young people think that if you go outside, you're going to be murdered by a police officer. And
let me ask you something, Brandon. Brandon,
it's 18 times more likely that a black person will kill a police officer than a police officer to kill a black person.
Brandon, let's give Josph a moment to respond.
Can I finish? Yeah. Can I just finish real quick? When we look at the stats in its totality, I think we need to really preach another message to the community so they're not living in constant fear unnecessarily. But we can address the issues that are wrong, police shooting people in the back, things like that. We all agree that those are bad situations.
Right. The things that he named, right, as far as black on black crime, rape, murders, right, that's the problem. When you start talking about how to fix the problem, we deflect to another issue. Rape, robbery, it's a different problem that we have in society, right? Why would me as a police officer, right, why would you compare my job to a criminal, black on black, a drug dealer shooting another drug dealer? That's not the problem. We're addressing a trained, highly trained professional whose job is to come out, protect, and serve. And don't get me wrong, there's more good cops than there is bad by far. Right. But the bad apples in policing, just like black on black crime, they magnify the police department. I guarantee you there's not one good cop, right, that does not want accountability. Because if he doesn't want accountability, then he's that problem. Let's stop talking about black on black crime. Let's stop talking about the crime rate when it comes down to robberies, rapes. Wait, no, why are you, I'm offended as a police officer, right, that you compare me to a criminal. And you're saying because these criminals have a high crime rate, let's not talk about your bad apples in policing. That's not how it works.
I think to be fair to Brandon, I don't think he's defending bad apple cops at all.
So let's address it. He's giving these numbers that make policing.
Can I interject a fact into this debate about what happened in New York in the 1990s, for example, we had an incredibly high crime rate in Black, Latino, and white communities throughout the entire city of New York. And it took Rudy Giuliani coming in with additional police force because these minority communities asked for protection. They asked for police. And when you look at the Congressional Black Caucus, they asked for the very strict drug sentencing laws. They asked for it because they were being killed.
What does that have to do with police brutality?
Because the police were asked to come to the community
They was
to
asked,
save lives.
You know what they asked for?
And if can I finish? I would like to finish the fact here. No, but the reality is, if you look at the murder rates and the trajectories of Black and brown men in this city, if it were not for the additional police, we would literally have thousands of fewer lives. This is an analysis by Heather McDonald. That the police saved Black and brown lives because he prevented the murder.
I didn't argue. I didn't argue. What you're trying to do, right? You're trying to deflect it.
It's not deflecting.
Yes, it is, because
it's saying the reason we have police is because they're
I want address the bad apples. Address the bad apples. I don't want them. Good. When the last time you seen a good cop, right, stop a bad cop from being a bad cop? We have bad apples in policing. Let's hold them accountable. I don't have any problem with being a crime fighter. I locked up a lot of bad guys, right? But I did it right. There's training, there's rules, there's regulations. We have officers that don't follow them. They get passes because they hide behind the blue wall and they're protected. So somebody like you should demand that your police department, your police officer, the same ones that you say that we all crave for, come out and do the job right. Don't come out and skip. Just don't do that.
Can we talk a little bit about
I think Brandon's we're agreeing on this point, right?
No, but we agree 1,000%. Like every police officer that is a good cop, it despises people who damage the badge.
Right.
What I'm saying in the perception of reality is I'm saying that a lot of these police officers that are bad are held accountable. I mean, look at some of the shootings that have happened out in South Carolina when the cop shot the young man in the back. Laquan McDonald shooter. These people are getting life in prison.
Can you explain why there are so many protesters who feel like police officers are not being held accountable?
Brandon, let me ask you a question. Officer Pantaleo, right? Officer Pantaleo, who choked Eric Gardner. What do you feel about Officer Pantaleo who choked Eric Gardner?
Okay, let me explain. Okay, I want to answer the young lady's question. Why are there so many protests? Because misinformation that's put out in the media is not a reflection of truth. I mean, when you look at what we consider as police
people involved in Black
brutality,
Lives Matter are confused.
We have to identify the difference between a police officer using force that you don't like versus a police officer using inappropriate force. What happened in Eric Garner's case, in my personal opinion, and I made a whole video about it, is that wasn't a use of force. In my opinion, that wasn't a negligent use of force. That person was resisting arrest. The police officer.
This is where we have the difference at, right?
Didn't even choke him. You know, when you look at the different types of chokes, whether the carotid choke or the cutting off the air supply to his esophagus, neither of those actually occurred. The gentleman had a heart disease. He had bad health that led to his death. He didn't even die on the side of the road. He died later on at the hospital. So what I'm saying is that we have to identify each situation and say, is this a wrong? Does this just look bad to me? Or is this actually inappropriate police behavior? And I think the large majority of inappropriate police behavior is accounted for. These people go to jail and people just disagree on the others. I think that there's a difference too between a justified shooting and a justified murder. There's a difference. Because if you shoot a person, you can shoot an individual justifiably, but what happens as a result of a justified shooting is that they may die, like the young man twirling the gun, Tamir Rice. It was justified for him to be shot, but his death happened subsequent after a justified shooting.
Brandon, let's maybe allow Joseph to answer that.
Let's give Joseph a chance to respond.
You just said, right, that Officer Lohman, who shot and killed little 12-year-old Tamir Rice, was justified. I'm 100% sure, being a police tactical instructor, the way the officers drove up to Tamir Rice within inches, that's not training. He could not pass an academy class. So it's not justified. If you as an officer, you're trained to respond to armed party calls. I've done that hundreds of times. I recovered 10 guns off the street, went to a federal task force, only one of a few officers that testified in federal court, right? The way those officers drove up to Tamir Rice within inches, and everybody's seen it. And you're right, there is a split second. As officers, sometimes you get that split second, but you do not supposed to create that split second. That split second is not designed as you as an officer. Hold on, Brandon. And what they did was they drove right up to him, and now they don't have enough time to assess. During training, every academy across the nation shows you how to respond to an armed party call. The way they responded was totally not policy, not training. I'm tired of hearing this argument about, we need more training, we need more training.
Brandon's
That's
agreeing
not
with
training.
you.
That's not
Brandon,
training. He's agreeing with me now, but he's
a SWAT team, I'm a tactical officer. I train new officers. I was
okay, so how do you justify Loman's, how do you justify his actions?
You got to hear me out.
Go ahead.
You have to hear me out. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that if I was teaching a person about how to approach a scene, that was an inappropriate way to approach.
Right.
But the shooter wasn't the driver. That's the problem. If the shooter was the driver, then you could say, okay, you created a situation that you ended up killing somebody.
You got
it is
two
all your
police
fault.
officers.
But the driver drove. Listen,
he didn't take an Uber to the car to the call.
Passenger in a bad position where he had to react that.
Guys,
no. That's
all right.
You got two
we have to
police
do a
officers
timeout.
going to it.
We got to end the show, guys.
Okay.
But I hope that Josph and Brandon would continue this conversation.
No, I love to talk to Brandon. That's fine, but I think
both
hold
of your
people accountable.
I think both of your expertise in law enforcement is so valuable.
Two officers, right?
We got to
training.
We got to end it.
He didn't take an Uber to the call. His partner.
Josph, we got to end it. We appreciate it.
No
thank
problem.
you so much.
All
and
right.
Brandon, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you will continue the conversation together.